What would happen if your workplace gave mental health as much attention as other metrics? Welcome back to the Vital Strategies podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Lonergan, and today I'm joined by Dr. Joe, a leader in mental health advocacy with the National Alliance on Mental Illness. In today's episode, Dr. Joe shares powerful insights on creating a stigma-free workplace where real conversations about mental health can happen. We discuss why this change needs to start at the top, how vulnerability can strengthen teams, and the costly consequences of ignoring well-being in the workplace. Stick around to learn how investing in mental health is not just a nice thing to do for employees, it's a smart business move. Dr. Joe Oravec, I appreciate you joining us here today. You're also comfortably known as Dr. Joe, so that'll be easy. I'll probably just keep referring to you as Dr. Joe throughout our discussion. But thank you for joining us. I'm excited about getting into this discussion about, we'll call it mental health in the workplace. We've had a number of these discussions, but I think it's critical when we think about starting at top down and how, as leaders, we can influence this. And you've got a long history in, we'll say, mental health. You're CEO of NAOMI Broward County, and NAOMI is the National Association of Mental Illness. Is that correct? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, National Alliance on Mental Illness, but overall, you have it.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So thank you very much for joining us here today. You've got a lot of experience helping coach executives and sort of helping structure organizations to have a not just high productivity, period, but like we have to be mentally well to be productive organizations. And so I'm looking forward to getting into that discussion.
Great. Well, I thank you so much for the opportunity. And, it takes people like you and others to recognize, to be able to embrace the conversation as opposed to sweeping in underneath the rug. And we have a lot of work ahead of us. However, with individuals and executives and leaders to be able to say, now's the time. And so let's dive deep.
Yeah. No, I think this is great. So I think one of the things that we need to work on, and I think there's a shift in this, is like getting the stigma around mental health out of the workplace. Because it's, I'll say, especially with guys, right? As men, we think, I just need to suck it up and just keep grinding through. And then we start to see things like, on one hand, we could have burnout, right? Like we're just not okay, and our bodies shut us down. We've seen clients that have been out for a few weeks just because they just kept grinding. And then we can also see it sort of manifest in other, behaviors that are also unhealthy. It could be substance abuse, could be, affairs, gambling, all these other vices that, can lead to unhealthy outcomes. And so I'm looking forward to talking about how we can sort of reduce the stigma. Is there a foundational, where do we start with this conversation? How do we bring it into the organization to start to open up, hey, it's okay to not be okay?
Yeah. Great entree to be able to see who, to an extent, the question is who brings it in, who's the individual. And what I have found in my years of experience is that, unfortunately, it sits with the HR department, kind of thinking that, all right, well, you're the expert, you help with benefits and to be able to realize kind of what do we need to do. However, even to enter the conversation, it needs to come from the absolute top. It needs to come from the CEO, the president of the organization, whoever that might be. And generally, hopefully, you formed your team to which you have that conduit and your confidants to be able to coach, to be able to say, this is what we need to do because this is what we're recognizing in the workforce. So it needs to be going back and forth to understanding what it is. A lot of the times at the top, there's not a comfort level to even have that conversation. So that's where I have found that in order even to get there, to talk about it within the workplace, it needs to first, for executives, to be able to start doing the deep work themselves. And we can go into that and to be able to see kind of how does one even approach that, and my own lived journey with that too.
Yeah. No, I'm very interested in that because I can just speak personally. I go to counseling every week. We can call it counseling, mental health coaching, therapy. I don't care what you call it.
Right.
Like I go and I think about my inner game, my mental game as like anything else. If I want to be really good at it, right? Like the best in the world at things have coaches, right? And so like Tiger Woods has a golf swing coach, right? And he's pretty good at, at least he used to be. I'm thinking back, when Tiger was at the pinnacle. And so we look at LeBron and Taylor Swift and all these other people. They have coaches in their lives on these things that they think are super important. So I think of it the same way. Like I want to be maximally productive, if that's the right word. And the only way to do that is to have health in, I'll say all categories, right? I've got to be physically fit. I've got to be mentally fit, spiritually fit, emotionally fit. All of those things need to be dialed in. So I say that. And I remember you're talking about starting at the top. I remember putting, this calendar appointment on my calendar, but I didn't label it as counseling. It was labeled, it was a private appointment or something along those lines. I'm like, forget this. Like, let's just make this an okay thing to be having a discussion about and to have my team see it and go, oh, cool. Pat's taking care of himself. That's a good thing. So yeah. Other thoughts on how it can sort of enter the equation from top down?
Well, that right there, being completely open and authentic and vulnerable allows, when the leader of the organization or the leadership of the company, of the entity, allows that vulnerability and transparency, that immediately starts to send a signal to the workforce that if they're doing this, maybe I can do it too. And it's a safe environment. So I want to ask you, what allowed you to switch, to pivot from just calling in an appointment to I'm gonna now be more open and say that's counseling?
Yeah, I think it was, we had one of our clients, one of their key people. It was a crazy year end and everybody was hustling to make things happen. And in the middle of it, he went out of the game. Like he just had we'll call it a mental breakdown, and was in the hospital. And then it was really just stress related. It was because he hadn't taken care of himself. And it's so interesting to see how our mental and physical health are so intertwined. It's like I don't know where one starts and the other ends, to be honest. And so I'm not sure where it was in this situation either. By all appearances, they couldn't really find anything wrong with him physically. It was more of like, hey, I'm mentally not okay. And so I was looking at that going, okay, we need to sort of make sure that this conversation's okay to be having. Like, I'm not okay. Let's have that be all right for somebody to raise their hand and say that. And so I'm going to just lead from the front and go, hey, this is just something that's on my calendar that, and this is why I'm doing these things. And it just allowed me, I have a really close relationship with that key person. And it just allowed us to have a really good conversation about, we'll call it skills and pills, right? Like, sometimes I need the right skills. And then, it's also okay to use some medication to help, get our brain chemistry in the right place. So that was sort of the key item on our end that sort of kicked it into, hey, this is okay to be talking about and have on our calendar.
And with that, and we can go further with this too, but my thought here is that probably once you did that, and what kind of and you don't have to answer right now, but what environment did that create for the rest of the team to be able to acknowledge that?
Yeah. And I think one thing that matters, that we just try to do a good job of is like, I like to show our people that I care about them, not just from a productivity perspective, but I care about you as an individual. I like to connect with you and understand what's going on in your life. And so, and we've often had times where, when I think about my priorities, and I don't expect my employees' priorities to be any different, but it's like, my faith is at the top of the list. My wife is next, then my kids, then my personal health and well-being, and then business. Okay. So if something comes up above work, I'm going to encourage you to go deal with that thing. Like, hey, your kids are sick, please go pick them up from school, take the rest of the day off. Like, we will figure out the work stuff. And so it sort of fit into that, thought process of like, hey, we're all here trying to take good care of ourselves. It's not about making look, we want to run a championship organization, right? Period, end of story at the end of the day. But I'm not going to sacrifice a championship organization for, the well-being of a team member. So, and I think having that culture mindset to start with helped sort of make it go, hey, this is something that aligns with those things that we're talking about. And I think one last thing is our core values, right? It starts with love for our team, clients, and community. And, we have to take care of the team before we take care of the clients. If we take care of the clients, then we can have impact in the community. And so it just sort of fit into those core values as well.
Outstanding. Well, and there you are. So that's exactly when I'm looking and having conversations with C-suite individuals one-on-one to be able to say, where are you at and how are you walking the talk with mental health and holistic well-being for your company versus performative. And that's where, unfortunately, sometimes when I hear the conversation, when I talk about to certain companies to be able to see if the CEO is ready for this conversation or not, because that's what I do. It's just like, I'm not coming on in, because there's definitely HR companies or HR departments say, oh, come on in, and we want you to talk about ending the stigma in the workplace. I'm like, I'm going to first have a conversation with your CEO. And I need to see if we're ready for this conversation. And, I would say 8 times out of 10, we're ready to roll. The other 2 out of 10, they're not there. They're like, well, we have EAP, we have a couple other things. And I'm just like, there's a lot more work that needs to be done because it can't be performative. And you have emotional intelligence that starts creating that empathy for your employees, and you set the stage appropriately for that.
Yeah. So I've got a question, I think about our organization, and I can interact with everybody on a fairly regular basis. Like, we also have clients that have 150 people in their organization, and they might not even know everybody's name. Right. And I think when you start to grow to that size, it can be easy for the culture to sort of get away from that. Like, oh, hey, I don't want to say we're kumbaya, like a small, tight family, but it can get away from that. It can be much more performance metrics based. And so how do you see, let's say a CEO is going, oh, I recognize we've drifted away from, this culture that we've used to have. I'm ready for this. How do we take it from, something that, like, in my organization, I can roll out tomorrow and talk to everybody between now and then and have it all going, versus like in a large organization where, it's a little more challenging. It's like, steering a battleship versus a ski boat, right? It takes a little longer to make some of those changes.
And with one particular company that I'm working with right now is just, it's fairly large. And it is something that I need to talk to the C-suite and the executives to see, okay, we have to go slowly here. Because in order, as we all know, in order to invoke change, you have to go that. It needs to go both ways. So how are we going to do? What is the culture? And I do not expect me to come on in. And it is, you all need to identify where are our strengths, where are our weaknesses, and how do we know our employees? How do we know them? As opposed to just numbers and data and analysis, because we are seeing more and more companies that are being much more nimble, and very large companies as well, to be able to say, we have to go deeper. So that is empowering the respective divisional leadership to be able to say, this is what I need to know. I know my workforce. And then to be able to work its way down and then work its way up. So you have that symbiotic process. It has to absolutely be buy-in. Buy-in has to absolutely be at the top, with everyone saying, we're going to do this. Is it going to be easy? No. However, with the emerging workforce, with those that are graduating out of college and such, believe it or not, they are expecting that the company that they are entering will have this understanding and a wellness with mental health well-being and the overall holistic wellness of their employees.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And it also makes me wonder too, like, how much of this could be grassroots from the bottom up, like I think if there's enough, as a leader, sometimes I'm ignorant to things, right? If I get enough discussion from the team, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I've missed this piece. Let's start addressing this as a piece of the conversation. And again, I think it goes back to culture and having the ability to have communication flow, both directions, from the bottom up and top down. But I don't know if you have any thoughts or comments on how this could be a little bit of a grassroots effort to like, hey, let's sort of inspire leadership to, implement some of these strategies.
It could be grassroots if there has been an example along the way, because that is where from the top, let me reverse that. If the grassroots are just saying, we've tried it before and it doesn't go anywhere. So what is the environment that has been created? What is there as far as, is there an incentive that's coming from all the different levels of the organization saying, we believe in this and we're going to do this? Is it an employee work group or what it might be to be able to show we believe in this? Our values, as you have set up with your company, we are doing this because our values say it. And we all have buy-in. That is what I've absolutely have seen as to when there is buy-in at all levels, then you're able to move it. You're able to steer that huge ship. But if there's one area that's just like, if there's an area that dismisses it, you're done.
Yeah.
You're done.
Yeah. This is great. So we're talking a little bit, and you mentioned this about vulnerability and authenticity. And I want to pick on authenticity for a minute. I think authenticity can also be like substituted for I'm being a jerk. Like somebody will be like, oh, I'm just being authentic. This is just who I am. And it's like, no, let's not, I can speak the truth in love, right? Like I can tell you the truth in a way that is like, shows that I care about you versus like clubbing you over the head with it. And so, we've talked a little bit about vulnerability. It needs to start at the top. But can we talk a little bit about authenticity and just how to do that well, like from just a pure communication point of view? And then we'll get into what it means to be authentic and where I'm at in my mental health journey.
I so appreciate this too, because a lot of people don't ask the question or even want to dive into it because it is vulnerable when you talk about it. So for authenticity, it is, and you said a key word too when you say I. So I feel this way. This is just the way that I am. The other piece that I have found personally with authenticity in my own work is that I need to realize, do I understand where the person I'm speaking with, where they're coming from? And if I'm ignorant, depending upon their own lived experience, be it from race, ethnicity, culture, socioeconomic, if I don't have that, I need to acknowledge that. And that's being authentic, that I need to learn more. Or I don't know what's going on, or at least I don't know where you're coming from, and I want to understand better. And that is where you're empowering an individual to be able to show that you don't know it all, which leads to your vulnerability, which then leads back to authenticity. It's that initial conversation, because quite honestly, and we know this, that the higher up that we go and the farther we advance, the quicker that we advance, egos get more and more and more and more. So how if I even enter a company and say, hey, let me talk to you about how I can help you be a more authentic leader, boom, doors are going to close really fast. Right. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm already authentic. Yeah. So we get there. And that's even with my coaching, is that, that we'll get there, but I'm not going to lead with that. It's more or less, how are people seeing you? But how are you interacting with? And so that's the lens that I have found personally in my success, and not success too, but that's where it's.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And this also leads me back to thinking about, there's, especially when somebody comes to me and I don't necessarily agree with what they're saying, I can still validate their feelings. I can validate the things they're saying and go, okay, I can see why you feel that way. Like I can understand that. And then I can approach with curiosity. And that takes me back to understanding where they're coming from, right? Like, oh, tell me about that. Tell me why you feel that way. And like, again, it may come from all sorts of different, everything from their upbringing to, the conversation they had with their spouse before they walked into the meeting, And so I think when we understand those pieces better, it allows us to, show up and help. I'm willing to, if somebody's done that, if they validated the way I feel and they approach me with curiosity, now I'm open to hearing what you have to say, versus like, especially if I'm not agreeing on a topic and I start immediately defending, myself or the position that, that I feel like I'm being attacked on, it can be really hard to have, vulnerable and authentic conversations.
No, that's true, because you're setting up in a conversation to whereby you're respecting the individual, and you're also acknowledging you might not know everything, and that's, you're putting on yourself as opposed to you. And this is the other piece too, that as we create a safe environment for conversations, whether it be moving up in an organization or from a mental health standpoint, and how do we make a productive, engaged workforce, that is where you have more buy-in and people feel comfortable of being their own, and then you go into being their authentic self, which it's hard. Yeah. It's hard because, really in society, we're not taught that. Mm-hmm. Certain generations have not been taught that. However, the younger generation now are, and that's where they're more comfortable. And so we have this multi-generational workforce where there's some dissonance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. So can we maybe talk about misconceptions with vulnerability? Like, what are some common misconceptions about being vulnerable in the workplace?
Sure. All right. Well, especially if you have a position of leadership or authority that you're completely weak. Mm-hmm. You're going to start crying in front of me, being vulnerable. Right. So we've got work to do. Let's get to business. And so with that, then it shuts down all communications. Or when you're in a meeting, I've been a part of those too. And earlier in my career, I've been leading those meetings when you're asking any additional questions, give me feedback here. I'm completely open to feedback. And just the delivery, everyone's just like, no questions. Say, great. I think we'll continue to move on. So it's like, how do you create? So then it goes, how do you create that? What is that vulnerability? And you don't have to share every single thing about yourself, because that takes amazing work. And for you, quite honestly, let me acknowledge this too. For you, going to therapy every week, same here with me. That is showing. That's vulnerability. That's just like I'm gonna move that, and so you can show it in a physical sense. You can show it in just a conversational sense, and it's beyond performative, and that is what's really, really important for employees to understand.
Yeah, no, this is great. So, and I know you do seminars on vulnerability and authentic leadership. Is there some practical steps that you just like, okay, here's number one, here's where we start, and this is sort of the framework that we walk through. How do you help leadership, go from being completely invulnerable, like I'm not going to discuss any of these things to, because I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I feel like this is very similar to, we'll call it running a marathon, right? Like I can't go from sitting on the couch, not moving at all, to go out on a Sunday and run, the 27 miles, right? Or 26.2, that I need to run, to complete a marathon. Like that would just be a disaster. Mm-hmm. And, what I need to do is like, I need to get up and go for a walk, and then maybe I need to start jogging a mile, and then eventually I'll get up to a 5K, and I can get to the point then where I'm can complete a marathon. Right. Is it similar in, opening up this conversation and sort of culture inside of an organization? Does it start with, we start here, step one, we got to get off the couch, or is there that drive-through breakthrough that, we sit down for a few hours and all of a sudden we've got this magic cultural change?
So you're going to hit the answer as far as it all depends. It depends on the culture of the organization. That's kind of where initially the assessment and the talking that I have with the leadership helps me understand as to where we're at. If they're just like, we have these meetings every week, we work, we have the employer work group, and we do a variety of things. I'm like, this organization, I can, and it's all bespoke, it's customized to be able to see where we are. So I absolutely agree. It's just like, it is not a one and done. And that's kind of how I need to have the conversations with the CEOs for them to realize that where are we just even having this conversation? Is this finally an aha? And that in one company about a month ago said, we really haven't done a lot about mental health, and can you come on in about doing a presentation ending the stigma? And I'm like, all right. And so I gave them one presentation, just the HR said, here, kind of look at this. And they came back saying, that's too much. I'm like, okay, let me pull it back. And we can go very slowly with this. And again, it's through my assessment. Sometimes even with the assessment that I give, it falls flat because even those in the leadership positions aren't tuned in. So I've realized that it is a relationship here and a partnership, because and I can't say that we want to get it right, because what does right mean? It's just congratulations, number one, for acknowledging that this is something that we need to do. And yes, it is, we need to train to be able to slowly get into condition to start ramping it up. And how do we empower? And there's just different ways. Again, how is the organization, the culture set up for it? So there is not one bright light. Is there an overall here is, and I have gone in saying, here's the curriculum of what it can be. Okay. We can do pieces of this. We can put it together and such. However, if your outcome is this, or what is your outcome? What does that mean? And if people say, well, we just want more authenticity and more vulnerability, I'm like, well, and this is kind of even my executive coach, and she's just like, well, let's take time one-on-one. All right. I am not a licensed psychologist. However, I've worked with psychologists specializing in executives, and that's how I had my breakthrough, and to be able to, in a very positive way. So that's kind of what I do want to say, is that it's hard to find, an executive support group. And they are out there. But when you have CEOs that are very vulnerable with each other in a very confidential setting, the amazing work that can be done because then it benefits you as an individual in your own personal life, and then into your company as well.
Yeah, I love that. And this is a little bit of an aside, but I feel like in today's society, we have all these connections, but we don't have any deep, meaningful friendships, And again, I'm speaking as a man. Women might be different, but I think if I generalize with men, it's it's no problem getting a group of guys together to go cheer the sports, event of the season, no problem with that. But sitting down and talking to a buddy and going, hey, I'm not okay. I'm not okay in my marriage. I'm not okay mentally. I'm not okay, whatever. We just don't like to have those conversations. We like to put the facade on we have it all figured out. So I think this leads me to my next question. It seems like the challenge might start at the top. It does start at the top, right? Let's get leadership to agree that this is something that is important to implement. And so I think, what other challenges sort of pop up? And then what are, on the opposite side, what are the rewards for putting in the work and dealing with those challenges?
So let me make sure I get. So the first question is, because I definitely got the second part too. So the first one again, can you say that?
Yeah, so if we take a look at, there's definitely challenges to bringing vulnerability and authenticity into the workplace, and some of those challenges start at the top. But are there additional challenges that are out there? And then once we face those challenges, what are the rewards for dealing with those?
The external factors and the challenges is kind of just driving the company, and how are we making sure that, depending upon, we're in Q4 now, are we hitting our goals for the year and setting that up, and how are we anticipating of growing? What does that look like? What does the economy look like? And so are we hitting all of that? However, going back to, we cannot do what we want to be able to do if we don't have the workforce in place to be able to support. So then that goes back into put the money and the resources into our people. So that we can understand how we go about driving that and making sure that they feel validated, understood, and heard. And that then, therefore, in the values of the company and the brand of the company, when you have employees talking to their own social groups, be it spiritual, financial, social groups, or whatever, talking about their company, and oh my gosh, I love working where I am because they get it. I feel like I can contribute. How is leadership creating that? So it's this amazing, wonderful wheel of progress. So going back to kind of what are the rewards? That is the reward that you have with your onboarding as well as your retention of your employees. That if mental health, and this is, and NAOMI did an amazing research study that came out in January about the workforce, and what I've really picked up speed with this, and I have absolutely made it my own because of my own lived experience too, is that if it's a multi-billion-dollar loss when you look at when you're not addressing the mental health in the workforce, burnout, it's just people are like, I'm done. So that's kind of like, it's an incredible reward system that's put in place if you acknowledge it.
Yeah, that's great. And I think one of the challenges I see as a business owner is like, if I put $1 into marketing, I can almost guarantee I'm going to know the rate of return on that. I put $1 in, I'm going to get $1.50 out in revenue. Okay, cool. Let's do that. If it's $2, $3, $10, like I'll be full gas on that. I think there can be some challenge on like, I'm going to make this investment in my workforce, but it's going to be really hard to measure. It's going to be hard to measure like what the output is. I think a year from now, I can probably measure. I can probably go, wow, we were more productive. We had less time off, and I'm not saying that, I think we should take time off. The data seems to support if you don't take at least 2 weeks off a year, you're less productive. So I think we should encourage that as business owners. But like, there's less sick days, we could call it, versus, people like they should go vacation. Right. And then I think we'll go, oh, okay, wow, my team is thriving, however we want to define that. Like they're crushing it in every capacity from a, personal, mental health, productivity at work, like everybody's succeeding. That's exciting. So yeah, I think that's really good, but I think that's probably the challenge for business owners to go, yes, I see this as a good idea, but I'm not sure, what my ROI is going to be if I invest these dollars into this initiative. So
and it's the retention of your employees. So it's the retention. Are people showing up? Are they showing up? Or you have the silent? Do you have the silent quitting? Yeah, and that's where that's a more newer term as far as silent quitting. That dependent upon generationally, people get it or they don't get it, and so that's kind of the other piece to recognize how do we address all of this, and it's that holistic sense. And so they're showing up, but you're just like they're not doing the work. I'm like, well, why is that? And how is leadership showing that taking a vacation, not answering emails after a certain time, all of that is it performative, or is it actually, are we doing what we're saying that we're doing to be able to show and giving permission that I'm taking it off, I'm shutting off, and I expect you to do the same.
Yeah, I love that. I've gotten to the point where I have an app on my phone that I can get into my email if I really need to, but all of the like work apps on the weekend are just shut off. Like I can't reflexively open my phone and hit the email, like, which is what I do. That's
amazing, because that's hard. That's really hard, Pat. It is absolutely hard for a lot of people to just shut it off because you feel what happens, what's going to happen. I don't know. And so that's again, your own work saying try.
Yeah. And I've done a fair amount of research these last year or so into what we'll call the Sabbath, and whether you think, from a spiritual perspective, that's important or not. The data is saying it is so good for you to take a day completely off, to be unplugged, to like totally refresh and relax. You're just more productive the other 6 days than if you just keep grinding all week long. So that's something that I think is worth highlighting. And then you also brought up another thing that I think is critical. I think we underestimate the importance of the onboarding process. And I wish I could remember the statistic, but it's something like in the first 30, 60, 90 days, I can't remember the time frame, employees decide whether they're staying long-term or not in that organization. And I think we as leaders can set the stage in those discussions when we're onboarding and training people. Not that we're necessarily doing it, but we're making sure that people understand there's zero expectation to respond to an email on the weekend. You might get one, which is totally fine. Right. And you can send one, totally fine, but please don't expect an immediate answer. This is not like instant messaging. Right. Same thing with the vacation expectations. Like we don't have defined vacation. Like take as much as you want. We're a results-based organization. So, but I look at it, and if you're not taking at least 2 weeks off, we've got a problem. So I'm sort of the other way. Like, I don't understand the organization that makes you like earn your time off. I'm like, you're just going to have a less productive employee. So you should give them 2 weeks vacation to start with. So I think a lot of those foundational pieces that you're talking about can be a part of the onboarding process, which A, sets the expectation, and B, puts the person in a position to go, wow, okay, I love what this organization stands for. I'm excited about being here. So, and I don't know if you have anything to add to that. But,
I would just say with which is outstanding. And then the onboarding is then how is that sustained? So is it just in the onboarding, or is it part of the culture? And this is just, again, not looking for an answer, but just for people in executives or people in leadership positions to think about. It's like, how do we now continue with that? And that even further sets up the new employee from an onboarding, saying that this is just not about the onboarding process. This is part of our culture, and we're going to check in with you. And this is how it's going to happen to be able to do that. Always open to feedback as far as what you think, but it's incumbent upon us, especially with a newer professional, that you are completely. It's a tabula rasa, a blank slate that they're coming on in, and you are able to create this amazing experience that hopefully they will pay it forward in their career. Just saying, I just had an amazing experience, and the company becomes a best practice as to how we onboard and how that continues on. So I will always ask companies to be able to think about, it's not a one and done. It's not a 3 month, 6 month. It is how do we continue doing that? So we can continue saying this is, because then it's just like, this is just part of the company culture, which is remarkable.
Yeah, I love that. And I also remember hearing about core values, mission, vision, that type of thing. About the time as a leader you're sick of saying it is about the time people start recognizing you even have these things. You'll be like, I'm blue in the face, and your team is finally like, oh, we've got a mission statement. I couldn't tell you what it is, but I know we have one. Same thing with core values. And so I think that's something to just piggyback on what you were saying. Like, you just have to keep beating the drum on these things regularly in your team meetings, in your communications. Like, they just need to be front and center regularly.
And why? And I think that is where, from an entry-level employee or a middle manager, when you're talking about the core values or the strategic plan and such, they're just like, I'm not in it here. And that's where they shut down. But to be able to say, why is it important for you? Employee year number 1, number 2, number 3 coming on. Why it's important? Because you are the lifeblood of this organization, and we want to help you support it. And you're the brand. We are the brand, and to be able to do that. So those are the kind of things that I've experienced again in my own career. Is that when I'm just like, don't you know the strategic plan? Don't you know the core value? And they're like, no, and why? But when you're at the leadership level and you're talking about it all the time, they're not.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Very good. So now I want to shift the discussion a little bit to, on one end of the spectrum, I feel like we have a thriving organization. Okay. On the other end of the spectrum, we have a toxic organization. It's for lack of a better term, literally killing the people, right? Like their health is getting worse, and it's not good. So I think about toxic, and toxic can happen a few different ways. It can happen because there's leadership just is, I don't know, maybe has the wrong values, and that's going to be hard to change. If that's the case, it might be time to find, a different organization, or they might recognize, hey, we've unintentionally created a toxic work environment. We've incentivized bad behavior, and we need to make some changes there. I think I'm generally curious how you identify a toxic work environment, and then what are some of the strategies that we can utilize to help change some of that?
There are certain elements when that have been identified, even in research, when you're that are saying you have an absolute toxic work environment. So when you think about who's leading, or if it's a particular area, is it a department, division, entity? And so you need to think about and look at the individuals that are leading it. So you have to think about, is it us as far as the employees, or is it we as far as the leadership? So, when you think about, is the leader of the organization of that area, are they open to feedback? Just how have we allowed that opportunity, and have we coached them? Is it on us for not providing that onboarding or that leadership for no feedback? Is there creating a heavily micromanaged that are wanting to know every single piece about what is getting done, and is there empowerment or not empowerment of the staff, and then to be able to see that as far as you're constantly talking about ROI, and we need to be able to make our goal, and is it constantly about budget and such, and so that is just taking the air out of everyone's tires, the proverbial message there. So when you look at all those different components, and there's more too, but those are the 3 out of the 5, those are the ones that significantly create that toxic environment, where people are just like, that's not for me.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting, because I'm thinking about this from a couple different perspectives. Like, I think somebody could have a toxic environment because they, I don't think anybody sets out to go, what I want? A toxic workplace. I can't wait to create this thing that just destroys people, right? I don't think anybody wants that. But I think it can happen unintentionally. So I think that's one way. Then the other is we've got a number of clients that are acquiring businesses, and you might have a great culture, and you might bring in this business that's not at your size, but it's like, oh my goodness, we have some issues over here. And I think it goes back to some of the things you were talking about. It's like, okay, we need to assess where this toxicity lies. And then we have to figure out if we can, and I'm curious, thoughts for change. Is it like, okay, we need to coach this person up. We need to change some of these incentives. How do we go about merging these cultures together and fixing some of the toxicity that might be there? Because it might be something that nobody's ever had to deal with before, because they've always had a thriving culture, and now they've got a toxic one, and they're like, I don't know what to do with this. And
it's where I will always would ask the question is, how has this transitioned happened? Where's the communication? And that's the other piece too, when people say, we just have to have better communication. And I'm like, we have to go deeper with that, because that's just, how are we helping people understand the decision behind this? Because everyone is human, and it needs to be humanized, as opposed to, this is a business decision, this is what we need to do. Yeah, it is. However, there are humans involved here, and lives, and you don't know what Joe over here has just gone through with his family, that now this is happening. So that's from a holistic standpoint. And when we humanize it, that is more or less, and I have worked with other consultants to which they help with when a company's bought out and so forth, to be able to help transition and such. I personally have just done it once when I had to outsource a particular entity, and people just thought that this bus was going to come on, and new employees were going to get off the bus. They were going to have to get on the bus and leave. I'm like, no. This is kind of how. And so it all is about process, talking to each other, explaining, and even over-explaining, and to be able to have people within each parts of the company to be able to talk to each other. So it's relationships. This all gets down to, how we're having conversations and relationships and trust. Because clearly when they're buying out a company or merging and such, that trust evaporates. And so how as the leadership is understanding that or not?
Yeah. This is wonderful. And I think one thing too that you've sort of mentioned a few times, but I think this would be a great time to reach out to you, Dr. Joe, and go, hey, I need some professional help. I'm really good at running my business. I'm not good at some of these, we'll call them culture things that I need to create, need to change to create a, world-class environment for people to thrive in. So I think that is something for people to consider as well. Can you give us a little bit of overview if somebody was like, hey, I need this in my organization. I understand, we're big believers in who, not how. Like, I don't need to know how to do it. Right. What I need is somebody that I can bring into my organization that can help me execute on all these things. So if somebody wants to bring you in, can you just talk through the different opportunities?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that too. So, there's three different components to which an individual can, or a company can look at what we offer. And it's from, let me first talk about how do we have conversations from trainings, to be able to say, what are different elements as far as the workplace, be it a toxic, or just, we want to start the conversation about embracing mental health and ending the stigma in the workplace. And are there additional bonus trainings that you can do? I'm like, yes, we can start that. We can absolutely bring it in a variety of ways. It's all curated. This is kind of when you look at my website to be able to see what it is. That's absolutely the baseline. However, it is completely, after time, to curate it specifically for your organization, and then the resources to which the company sits. So if it's within, the greater Chicago area, if it's in rural Nebraska, whatever, that's my job to be able to work, to be able to see, okay, here's some additional resources. So it's teaching how to fish. And then we're able to go from that. So that's from the workshop trainings. The other piece too is from keynote speaking. That and some really good success of just the ideas of, hey, we want to roll this out to our company, or even within an association that people belong to be able to say we firmly believe that this is something that we need to talk about as far as mental health and leaderships, and how do we embrace that? So there's a variety of different topics that I've been able to do as well. And then, one-on-one, as far as, with you as a leader of your company, kind of how can I help to be able to continue with this conversation and to really strengthen what you already bring to the table? But it takes time. In order to do that. And there's different ways, I have a whole, and I will say it here, there's a whole framework to which I've created of excuse me, for life first. And I will say it here that no one takes it away, is just everyone talks about the work-life balance. I push back on that. And I actually say, why do we, if we're looking for that, why do we lead with work?
Yeah, I love it.
And I believe that it's life first, and then we can kind of talk a little bit about what that looks like, because there's never balance. So there's ways in which we can move through that. And so we had some really good success. That it's you're in it for the long haul. And I appreciate the marathon approach too, because I personally do Spartan sprints. I don't do it full. But this is kind of that you have to train and you have to start it. Just something to know that and the other piece here is, if you don't start doing it now, when are you? And are you going to do it by yourself? You haven't done it by yourself yet.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so good. And I get really frustrated with the work-life balance thing. And I'm like, it's not balance. I don't want equal amount of work in my life, right? Like that sounds, I like the concept of like harmony. I want harmony in my life. And I want if we think about going to listen to the orchestra, you have the right amount of violin and the right amount of bass, and all of the instruments come together to form, a beautiful piece of music. And if you get out of harmony, right, in your life, then things get out of whack, just like that piece of music. And so
you just said it. So that's my approach. The framework is life, work, harmony. And so to be able to know that fluidity is incredibly important. And that's why we'll continue. It's like nails on a chalkboard for those people that know what a chalkboard is now. It's just like, it's not work-life balance. That is kind of where, and that's kind of the other piece that I coach, and just saying, how do we just shift that lens, that framework?
Wonderful. Dr. Joe, this has been amazing. Is there anything else that we should be talking about before we talk through, how people can get best in touch with you?
I think to recognize that, to give grace to everyone that's starting to talk about this more and more, and that I so appreciate what this platform that you allowed, Patrick, because and not to let it sit on the shoulders of HR. So that is where to be able to, for leaders, CEOs, executives to understand their partners, however, to be able to lead in or lean in to the C-suite, to be able to say, this is all of us. And we might not be comfortable, and we all have strengths, but it's really important that we, because it blends into your life, and that's incredibly important.
I love it. Wonderful. So if somebody wants to engage with you, what's the best way to do that? And we'll have links to all this in the show notes, but where should people start?
Well, my website for joeoravec.com, and you'll be able to put that in, just put it right on out there. And I also, I'm pretty good on social platforms as well. So LinkedIn is really important to be able to engage, write that right away. On not necessarily on the weekends, but I'm extremely responsive as well. And then Instagram too is another way that I recognize. But everything is on when you go to the LinkedIn, and even on my website as far as a link tree to be able to do that. And what I really do is that how kind of set up a consultation. It could be 15 minutes or half an hour to then see if this is if it's a good fit, to be able to say, should we, and then we can talk longer. But that's kind of as far as, because I have expectations to be able to say, okay, you're really in it, or is it just kind of, well, someone told me that I needed to do it.
Yeah. I love it. Wonderful. Yeah, we'll have links to your website because Oravec is ORAVECZ.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. So it's joeoravec.com. And so,
So we'll have all of that in the show notes so people can check out your resources. But Joe, this has been great. I appreciate all the work you're doing. I think it matters, not just from a productivity dollars and cents, but that's a benefit to doing all this work, but like the people, this is creating better lives. People are living, we'll call it, in harmony with work, and that's a wonderful thing. So appreciate you.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I mean, you're creating an incredible platform to be able to do this. So kudos to you, Patrick.
Wonderful. Thanks, Doctor. Have a great day.
All right, you too.
That brings us to the end of today's episode on the Vital Strategies podcast. I hope you're walking away with new ideas on how to make mental health a priority in your workplace. A big thank you to Dr. Joe for sharing his expertise in illustrating the powerful impact of supporting mental well-being in a professional setting. As you consider ways to enhance your team's mental health and productivity, remember that investing in people is one of the most valuable moves you can make. For more tools on creating a resilient and engaged workplace culture, head to vitalstrategies.com/mental health. As we're getting our year-end tax strategies implemented for our clients, we wanted to give you the tools you need to save big money on tax this year. To access the resources that can help you create a tax strategy, head over to vitalstrategies.com/cornerstones for access to all of our free resources. These tools are designed to help you pay less tax, build more wealth, and live a great life. Again, that's vitalstrategies.com/cornerstones. Remember, these dollars are better used in your hands than in the hands of the government bureaucracy. Thank you for listening and for being a vital entrepreneur. You're vital because you're the backbone of our economy, creating opportunities for your employees and driving growth. You're vital to your family, fostering abundance in all aspects of life. And you're vital to me because you strive to build wealth, make an impact through your business, and live a great life. Until next time, I'm Patrick Lonergan, and you've been listening to the Vital Strategies Podcast.